guys! So with all that's currently occurring in the world, I thought I'd begin to do a series of DBT skills and how we can apply them to kind of the unique situations that have begun to occur due to COVID. And so today I'm starting out with an emotion regulation skill. And if you know DBT at all, you might be thinking why wouldn't you start out with distress tolerance? Everybody's in distress right now. We all need some immediate gratification. Give us those immediate skills. Well, yes, the distress tolerance skills are in the moment going to help you out immediately. But if you understand this is the foundation for the distress tolerance skills. It's the foundation for everything because it's the model of how we experience emotions. And so when you know all the different pieces to emotions, then you know where you can come in and hijack it. Put yourself back in the driver's seat. This is all modified from Marshall Linehan's DBT skills training handouts and worksheets. I'm using page 213, Emotion Regulation Handout 5, Model for Describing Emotions. And as you can see, I've kind of taken this and changed it up a little bit just so it'll fit in my vertically oriented whiteboard. But it is all the information on this page. So if you don't live in the psychology world, if you're not a therapist or a counselor, or you've never been to therapy, you've probably never spent much time thinking about what are emotions? Why do we experience emotions? You just have sadness and joy and they're part of life and they're just not too much of a big deal. But for us in this realm, there are all these pieces to emotions. And when you understand it as a construct better, then you understand how to change things. And so that's why I chose to start with this piece today, is because understanding all the different pieces of emotions tells you all the different places you can put skills in to change your emotions you're currently experiencing. For the most part, I'm going to focus on anxiety as I talk about this, because I think anxiety is the predominant emotion that, globally we're feeling anxiety right now. So it's going to be kind of my example emotion as we move through this flow. So before anything even comes to begin triggering an emotion, vulnerability factors exist. They're the pre-existing things that you're always dealing with. And normally when we're talking about vulnerability factors, we're talking about things like, did you sleep last night? Are you dealing with physical pain? Are you hungry? So have your physical needs been met? Are you dealing with stressors in your general life? Maybe issues in an important relationship or job or economic stress. Those are vulnerability factors, right? Anything that makes you able to less than optimally deal with the emotions you are exposed to during the day is a vulnerability factor. So normally vulnerability factors are pretty personal, right? Related to self-care. Right now though, we're experiencing a global vulnerability factor. None of us truly knows what's going on, how long this is going to last, how much life is going to be changed in the next few months. And so we're living in an era of uncertainty. We've been knocked off our routines. We're all feeling the financial pressure. We got a lot of vulnerability factors. Makes sense that you're feeling big emotions right now. Totally makes sense. But those big emotions can be not helpful, right? Anxiety and depression can be crippling, and we want to make it through this time as successful and as effective as possible under whatever our unique circumstances are. So, experiencing the emotion begins with the prompting event. Prompting meaning, prompt, start, initiate. These can be either internal or external. Internal prompting events are usually sensations or thoughts. Sensations being maybe I feel pain and that triggers sadness because I'm not able to do what I want. But mostly we talk about thoughts as internal prompting events. Now, as solid people, we like to think we have complete control of our brain. I can control what I think about when. And that is true to an extent. When we are mindful, we have the ability to change our thoughts. But we don't have the ability to prevent certain things from triggering certain thoughts. Life goes on around us, and we have external cues that maybe we don't even consciously recognize that begin to trigger thoughts. And so internal thoughts can be helpful and unhelpful, right? And what we're going to want to know is, when is an internal thought prompting this anxiety cycle? That's one of the things we're going to definitely look for. External prompting events are things outside of us, anything outside of us. Could be our kids running around our house because they've already been home for 2 weeks. But like the big prompting event I'm thinking about right now is the news channels, right? You can turn on television at any time of day and it's only going to be about this. And so if you're dealing with anxiety, the biggest prompting event for your anxiety, I bet, is you receiving more information from wherever you're receiving it from. And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit in a minute. That external, so that's a hijack point, right? We can change it right there. If our external prompting event is causing anxiety, we can choose to reduce that external prompting event by avoiding it. All right, so moving on. Our next piece is our interpretation. This is how we think about whatever the prompting event is. Where our interpretation can be unhelpful and lead to more anxiety is when our thoughts have cognitive distortions in them. And distortions are identified thought patterns that we all agree are unhelpful. And there are like 15 really common ones that you would see in the psychology fields. Things like black and white thinking, minimizing, catastrophizing, personalization, judgments, labels, assumptions. Anything very extreme is a cognitive distortion. If you say every time, always, never, so those are thoughts, like if you catch yourself in those big definitive words, you're in distortion thought, and you can change your emotion by changing your thoughts right there. If you don't know anything about cognitive distortions, just search that phrase on the internet and you'll find a list of all these most common ones plus techniques to go through and rewrite them. And that's a great starting point. If you're struggling with mental health right now, look at your thought processes and how are your distortions affecting, because that's a really big one contributing to anxiety. Okay, so we've had the prompting event, we're thinking about what's happened in our brain, and we're also experiencing these body changes at the same time. The first body change we are experiencing is hormonal. So anxiety is going to bring about adrenaline and it's going to bring about cortisol. For us in the US, we're about 2 weeks into this, like really how it's affected our day-to-day life. For some people, they're already at 3 months into how it's affected day-to-day life. And you think about, like, that is saturating your system if you are dumping in cortisol at a rate so much higher than normal and you're living with it day in and day out. I've heard a lot of people say, I'm tired, my soul feels tired. That's the hormonal reaction of every day experiencing anxiety at heightened levels. The sensations. So we all experience anxiety differently in our body, but there are some common things, right? We talk about a tightness in the chest. We talk about shallow breathing, especially when we get closer to panic attacks, right? That really quick, rapid, shallow breathing. Some people experience tingling in their arms or fingers. Some people experience anxiety as digestive issues, right? An upset stomach or knots or butterflies. So when we feel it in our body, and then we have urges also. And I want to take a moment to talk about urges because this is really important. Because our vulnerability factors are high, we may be dealing with old urges that we haven't had to deal with in a while, right? I come from a trauma background. I know most of my clients come from trauma backgrounds. And so the general emotional atmosphere, crisis, uncertainty, high anxiety, lack of control. The 4 things, they feel like most of our initial trauma. And so it makes sense right now that if you are feeling all the trigger points, that you are opening up those old neural pathways. And I've talked to a couple of former clients who said, I'm really struggling with this, and I didn't struggle with it six weeks ago. I thought this beast was behind me. And so if you're in that place, I really want to encourage you to reach out to whoever your version of me is, whoever helped you the first time. We understand that this isn't like your personal failure. This is like how the brain reacts to trauma. And this is a new and different type of trauma, but it's absolutely bringing up old stuff for a lot of people. And it's okay if you're one of those people. Don't be too ashamed to talk about it, because we all know shame creates a spiral, creates the worst problem behaviors, gets us further in. Ask for help. Let's nip it in the bud if you're in that place. So these 3 pieces. How can we hijack our emotion from body changes? If you're an exercise person, this is your block to hijack. if you can run or jog or do sit-ups or push-ups or whatever, like then you are reducing those cortisol levels. We all need to be focusing on that right now, physically reducing our cortisol levels. But like I said, like if exercise is your thing, this is where you're always going to be focusing on this block. For sensations. So if you are very physical, a lot of us empaths feel all these emotions in our body. This means taking lots of care to do self-soothing, whether it's wrapping up in your blanket, whether it's taking your bath. I take like 2 hot Epsom salt baths a day right now because I just, like I need that cleansing of my energy field. You know, having your glass of hot tea that you are mindfully enjoying. Also, you know, there are some theories that hot tea is very good in preventative natures. So those are your 3 ways to deal with body changes. Exercise to do the adrenaline, reduce the hormonal effects, self-soothe to hit the sensations and urges. Use your plan for minimizing your urges and reach out to who your person is. Okay, so at the same time, we're having body changes and interpretations. We're also having our outward expression, right? This is our inward stuff. This is our outward stuff. So the first outward expression of emotion is typically body language. But guess what? Like our body language is all kind of off right now because we're practicing social distancing. So even within our homes, we're not touching the same way we used to. We're not sharing or hugging and so like that's almost like a big question mark right now. Like body language is kind of off. Words and actions. Anxiety makes us snippy. The word we use in clinically, like as clinicians, as we talk about people, it's often prickly, right? Like anxiety makes you hard to love because you're just so on edge. And so are you choosing words that are sharing love, or are you speaking out that continues to reinforce that anxiety? What is the environment you're creating with your words and your actions? We say emotions are self-loving. They love to self-perpetuate. And so if you are a news junkie and your action is, I'm going to watch more news because I'm anxious, then you're hitting prompting event 2. Like, oh, I just did this whole loop on this news story. Probably prompting event 2 is getting started, so I can do it again. And that'll just keep happening until you break the cycle. So if you know what your prompting event is and you know you can avoid it, deliberately do that. Okay, other things that come after the expression. There's 2 other things over here. Prompting event 2 plus after effects. So I've already hit on this just a tiny bit. Like our bodies are feeling the long-term effects of increased stress. And so it makes sense that your heart, like your soul is tired. That at the end of the day, you feel drained in a way you haven't felt before, even if you are physically like not doing anything compared to what your daily demands were 2 months ago. That makes sense. We are losing resources. And so that means we've got to be more deliberate about how we nurture ourselves in this time, what we put back in, because this environment is taking more quickly from us than usual. This other thing I wanted to hit on was secondary emotions, that the idea that in some environments we're taught that one emotion isn't okay. And so as soon as we start feeling that emotion, we feel another emotion to cover that up. And specifically with anxiety is part of the fear family. And so if you grew up in an environment where it was never okay to show fear, the emotion you might be experiencing more of right now is anger. And if that's the case, I encourage you to look at that anger and say, what is underneath it? Am I really scared? And do I need to be dealing with these fears? Because both anger and fear, they're not going to get us anywhere right now. Like, love is the answer. Like, we've got to practice love for ourselves, love for fellow human beings. And so, like, these negative secondary emotions, whether it's anger or fear, like, they're separating. And right now we need things that bring us together. So I hope you've enjoyed this little introduction to emotions, some thoughts about how you can put skills in. Like I said, interpretation. We're going to be dealing with cognitive distortions. This is some of our more physical stuff. Words and actions, focusing on love. But I really do believe this lays the foundation for everything else that we'll talk about the next few weeks. I wish you and your family the best of luck as we navigate these uncertain times. I hope to be a voice of peace and calm for you. Namaste.